Hello again, everybody. Well, I hope you're still managing to do okay in these challenging times and that you're knowing and experiencing the presence and power of God in your life. For our Saturday morning messages, we're sharing a summary of what we've been looking at during the week. All the groups have been great this week, been a real blessing to me. Really enjoyed engaging with all those who've come. And we've been thinking about all the I am statements of Jesus and asking the question of why does he make these statements? And he doesn't just make them for information so that we'll know more about him. He doesn't only make them so to declare that he is God in human form. He does both of those things. But more than that, as we look at the statements he makes following his I am statements, and they're all on the PDF that was the link of which was included in today's email. All the 7 statements are there and his follow-up sentences, and in each one we discover that Jesus is sharing these things in order to get a response from those who are listening to him, in order to get a response from us. He says, I am whichever one it is, and then he says, come to me, or know me, or believe in me, or follow me, or remain in me. He wants a response from us that involves us coming to him. The one from last week that Dave taught, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. And so we looked at those 2 phrases, come to me and believe in me. How do we come to Jesus in these days? We can't travel to see him like we could when he walked the earth. So how do we come to him today? And as we've talked and shared together, the key ways that we come to Jesus are through his word, by opening God's word and reading about God's interaction with man that led to Jesus coming and giving his life for us. That we find Jesus in his word, and we can come to him through that and listen to his voice, and also through prayer, through engaging with him, through speaking to Jesus and listening to him. And that actually, although Jesus no longer physically walks as a human being on the earth, to actually go to him in those days when he said come to me would have involved probably a few days of travel and trying to find a way through the crowd that was around him to get anywhere near him. Whereas now in these days we can come to him in a moment with our hearts and our minds. Paul in Colossians 3:1-2 says, since then you've been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. And we have the opportunity in every circumstance, in every situation of our lives, to set our hearts and our minds on him. And that's how we come to him. Jesus also reminds us in Luke 9 and Luke 14. These passages are on your sheets. All the different passages we looked at through the week are there for you to peruse and consider. Jesus reminds us that sometimes coming to him involves us leaving other things behind. There are things sometimes in our world that we look to for satisfaction, or we look to for peace and well-being, or we look to meet our needs, and those things are found in Jesus. And sometimes those things we hold tightly, we need to let go of in order to come to him. And just use the other verses on the sheet under the heading Come to Jesus to consider and ponder some more on what that means and what it involves. And I'll just read one other before we move on. 1 Peter 2:4-5. Peter writes, as you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. That each time we come to Jesus, whatever we come for, whatever our purpose in coming is, he works in us to grow us and build us to maturity, to grant us holiness, and to enable us to make sacrifices for him. He is at work building us into a spiritual house each time we come. That's a great comfort and encouragement to me. And then how do we believe in Jesus in these days? What does that look like in our lives? Well, as we've taught through the week, it's so clear that this involves putting our belief into action, believing in Jesus. It's not just believing about Jesus. It's putting that belief about him into practice. Just as Psalm 34 says, taste and see that the Lord is good. As Dave talked about taking Jesus into our lives, it's hearing what he says and putting it into practice in our lives and putting our belief in him. Again, there's a variety of verses on the sheet that can help you just meditate on what it means to believe in Jesus and what results from us putting our faith in him. So have a look at those. Let me just share one again. Luke 6 verses 47 to 48, a well-known story that Jesus tells of the builders of the houses. But he says this: as for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice. So here's believing in him. That's what we've just said it means. It's about hearing what he says and putting what he says into practice. He says, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. When the flood came, the torrent struck that house but could not shake it because it was well built. When we believe in Jesus, when we put our belief into practice, then our lives cannot be shaken. And notice it doesn't say that the one who believes in him, well, no flood comes and no torrent strikes that house. That's not what it says. It says when the flood comes and the torrent strikes, they cannot be shaken. And so we can be confident, even in the midst of a global pandemic, that if we hear Jesus' words and put them into practice, if we believe in him, then our lives are on a strong foundation and we cannot be blown over. And one other thing, just to remind us of, from Romans 10:13 to 14, Paul writes, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? It's a helpful reminder. Paul doesn't say you have to get on with telling people. He just shares the picture. Everyone who calls is saved. How can they call if they don't believe? How can they believe if they haven't heard? How can they hear unless we tell them? So our motivation is not because we have to, but it's out of love and compassion, that we want others to know Jesus, to come to him for themselves and believe in him with their lives. So that's basically what we've been looking at through the week in our groups. But I have one extra bit. In fact, I have an extra I am of Jesus. Now, you weren't expecting that, were you? At the end of today's session, Andrew Waller came to me and just shared another I am that someone had taught him about a little while ago. And it comes from John 18. This verse isn't on your sheet, but I'm going to read it. So John 18, Jesus has been praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's been with his disciples, and now he's going to the point where he's about to be arrested. So this is John 18 from verse 1. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden carrying a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns and weapons. Picture the scene in these soldiers arriving, a big group with torches, lanterns and weapons coming to arrest Jesus. And verse 4, Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them. Jesus comes to them rather than hiding from them. And he says, who is it you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. And then Jesus says 3 words, I am he. And with this final I am, Jesus offers his life. He gives his life willingly, just as he said the good shepherd, when he's describing himself as the good shepherd, he uses these words: no one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. Here in these three words, in this final I am, Jesus gives himself up for us. He doesn't run, he doesn't hide. He comes out and he says, I am he. And when he said that, verse 6, it says they drew back and fell to the ground. The power of Jesus' words. This is Jesus' surrender of his life for us. And this whole crowd of soldiers fall to the ground. It's an amazing picture and an incredible reminder that this Jesus, of whom all these I am statements are true, Almighty God in human form, this incredible Lord, chose to give his life up for us so that we could live. It's a remarkable truth. And so there's going to be a song play after this. It's a song I played at the end of each of the sessions this week. It's by Chris Rice. And it's a song, it's actually called Untitled Hymn. But we call it Come to Jesus because that's the main theme. It's a song that starts with us as a sinner coming to Jesus and just takes us through our lives, the varying circumstances, and how we can continue to engage with Jesus in different ways through the good and the bad of our lives. So use this, and as you listen, make that choice to say, yes, I'm going to today choose to come to Jesus and believe in him with my life. Great to talk to you again, and we'll catch up again soon. All the best. Bye for now.